All right. Hey guys. Hello world. This is Dawit Alamayehu. Recording for the state of secondary school education in Africa today. So I'm really super fascinated by this question because I'm a teacher slash educator. I teach math, physics, and theory of knowledge at the high school level at the International Leadership Academy of Ethiopia. But I'm also an educator that actually, for example, really loves designing curriculums that are disruptive and really help out the community. For example, I just recently designed a curriculum for street entrepreneurs that that do like different work like shoe shining and kind of like cleaning cars and different activities. So I'm really interested here in this video, kind of to capture what I wanted to communicate to you guys, right? So for me, what I want to focus on is the student, the learner, right? The African student, the African learner. What are products, resources, curriculums, things that we have to think about, conversations that we have to have, and products we have to design for our students. So the student, the learner, right? What do we have to provide for that student or learner? The first thing we have to think of is removing the barriers for the student, right? So if I take you to a little survey that I did here, state that I call the state of secondary school education in Ethiopia, I actually collected a small sample, 10 responders here at our school, mostly government school students that applied to our high school. So you look at the questions that we have to ask, and here in my survey what I'm doing is asking questions like, what is the primary function of secondary school education? I feel like I do not like school. When? My success in subject most depends on. All my favorite teachers have this quality, and the rest of the questions follow. So what I started with is by starting to think about, okay, what are the barriers that we want to remove for students, right? For good student learning. So in that instance, the objectives of what we're trying to do become clear, right? So first, identifying and compiling the best teaching practices that make learning work for students. Second, identifying and compiling various learn to understand master practices that work for students, and investing the elements of secondary education curriculum in Ethiopia that are necessary for global competence. So this can, this could be like for the rest of Africa also. It will extend. It could be like what we're doing here in Ethiopia can be scaled to the rest of Africa. So what I want to express is the following, right? Our conversation should support the students and the learner by providing the following elements I'm going to talk about. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 elements that I have been thinking about and developing for the last year or two, because I also work as a curriculum designer. So the first thing I start with is that African students have to have a platform of self-examination. The saying, an examined life is not worth living, right? So if we're thinking in those terms, what it means is that the student has to know the reason the student is going to school. Why am I going to school, right? What is my 5-year long vision, and how do I get there? Students have to have a very kind of interrogated and like well thought out sense of why they're going to school, right? And why they're learning, like and what future they see them for themselves, like a vision of themselves, right? And so the kind of persistence and grit to carry on will have necessarily been installed if a student is clear about like who he or she is and why they're learning and why they're going to class, right? The second thing I want to talk about is creativity and entrepreneurship support. And what I mean here is that students need an outlet to express themselves, right? Like here at our school, for example, like a student wants to be like really funny and like to do really cool things on Vine, so we create this right support system for that. Like we also have spaces for students to do plays, to do theater, to express what their feelings are about race issues, for example, tribal issues here in our country. Plays about the history of ADEA, one of the most defining wars, the Ethio-Italian Wars that took place, right? So just having that creativity outlet, we find is very important for my school, and I think for the African learner in extension. And then also entrepreneurship, right? Because one of the things that we're tasked with your committee is to think about jobs, right? How do we create employable kids, right? And so having platforms for entrepreneurship, like educating students about businesses, how to run your own business, but also in the process how to be really demanded, like how to have the necessary skills, like interpersonal skills, technological skills, coding skills, how to have the logical and mathematical thinking skills to connect, to reason, to be a good worker, right? So in that sense, here, what I've done is here, sharing, like with our students, for example, we share resources like the business model canvas here, so that our students are thinking about how to create value for my community if I'm creating a business, right? And so if I'm working for a business, I also know they want me because I'm a great accountant, or they want me because I'm a great designer, right, etc. And all aspects of a business, right? Things like making a successful business would have to have diversified revenue streams, right? If I am, for example, let's say, if I have an internet cafe, why don't I also, have a station that lends books, right? So that when my internet is down, people can check out books, and I can get revenue from that, or I can have macchiatos where people can drink that, right? So giving our students, giving the African student, the learner, a sense of how business in general works, right? And then also there are technology hubs like ISAD is here in Addis, and I think in Nairobi and Lagos, somewhere where there are a lot of the idea of technology hubs is really expanding. And we also have something called Techno Team, which is a school entrepreneurship team that is working on kind of providing technological solutions like antivirus software that they could sell. Learn the idea of prototyping their scientific or technological innovation. So student learner needs this support also. The third thing I want to talk about is shared learning resources, right? So, for example, students will succeed when they are able to have access to tutoring, self-learning, all these resources and spaces, right? One of the responses that I garnered is the following, right? Students responded to the question, my success in a subject most depends on you see that 60% is study time, right? And this is granted, this is a small sample. Maybe I have to do the survey again to show you what would be a more accurate response. But based on this response, we could see that students are looking for learning resources that will give them tutoring sessions, a lot of like self-study time and etc., right? So the reason that I have added here paid student tutoring programs is that it will incentivize teaching learning, right? But also students learn sometimes really well when they are with each other. Also kind of making accessible at internet cafes, community learning centers, etc. Education on these incredible resources. Like one of the things I do is I in addition to my own classrooms, I like to direct students to other learning resources, right? So Khan Academy, right, which is my favorite. Here we have, for example, students learning how to program here, right? So in their computer program section, having students kind of just tinker and play with these kind of things, right? So if I want to learn how to do like basic coding of like shapes and complex shapes here and colors, etc., I have a lot of time to play with it. I have immediate feedback right here, right, which strikes that good balance. So giving students access to these kind of resources like Khan Academy here. Additionally, Coursera, right? That's also a really good resource that I like to direct students to, teachers to, right? Because we're all kind of together in this, right? So giving our teachers, for example, in a community learning center, letting teachers know about a resource like this, right? I could learn about assessment and teaching 21st century skills, and here are all the lectures here, and then in a quiz here that I could take, and be involved here, right? So I can also just read the script here. So if the pronunciation is giving me difficulty, I could just look at this. So these are the things I want to talk about, right? So the student and the learner just benefiting from shared learning resources, right? There are vast resources within the school that we need to incentivize, but also cloud resources that definitely we can use, right? So that there, right? And additionally, the fourth thing I want to talk about is this, and in Africa, I feel we're not talking about this nearly enough, right? I think our school is trying to do that, but we're still a long way. But acknowledging the community knowledge systems that comes naturally to our students, because our students exist in a place and geography defined by their Ethiopian sensibilities. No matter which region they come from, you have they're familiar with things like savings and loans association, what we call here ICO, right? Or EDR actually. Kind of associations, economic community associations that come together to fund weddings and graduations and funerals and whatnot, right? And so the learner needs to constantly kind of constantly be engaged with what the community is actively doing, the things that we're seeing in the community, being acknowledged in the classroom space for the student, right? The merit of these kind of associations, the need to respect our traditional courts, right? Because they do work for a vast number of Ethiopians, and and these need to be in our curriculum. These need to be discussed. These need to be fleshed out, etc. for the learner, because it is something intimate to the learner. It's something very intimate to the student. Similar with European medicine and nutrition, right? If there's a chemistry, biology classroom about, fermentation, then, and the benefits of kind of good bacteria that you get from fermented food, we should be talking about Ethiopian food and Ethiopian nutrition, and the student will be intimately interested in that. So I think integrating, maybe even creating separate classrooms, separate classes, separate extracurricular sessions, separate kind of dialogical learning sessions for the students that really tie in with the community knowledge systems, with the questions and the concerns of the community, should also be addressed in the school. The economic, the social, and all of those things, right? And then the last one is a leadership platform. If you want our students to succeed in the workforce, if you want them to be productive, if you want them to be innovative, if you want them to contribute to the overall, productivity of the country, you have to, define leadership to all our students. In every role. It doesn't matter if you're a baker, right? You have to clean, your kitchen area. You have to lead by showing other bakers that, you come on time. Or you could be a minister at the African Union that graduated from, a Nairobi High School or Algiers High School, but it doesn't matter, right? So the leadership platform, is things like Rotary Club. I like the global connectivity of clubs like this, or YALI, where you get these leadership opportunities and fellowships, and you're connected. And I like, different communities, through maybe also scholarship programs like Chevening, which I have not added here, and MasterCard. All these leadership platforms allow our African youth to be connected, to exercise kind of volunteer activities and leadership activities, in the community, and that exercise will eventually make sure that we have good citizens that contribute to the well-being of our community, right? So I think this is it. I'm running. I don't want this video to run really long, but this is what I wanted to share with you. I hope it's very clear. I'll try to be very concise, but that is generally what I think the conversation we should be having about, right? The student and the learner needs good practices. Needs good teaching practices that are turned into a curriculum, a product, and needs to know about what is the latest in the cognitive science of how does a student learn, etc., etc. Just removing all the barriers to student learning in order to make that student globally competent, like I talked about. So what is good for the student? What should our teachers be talking about to remove the barriers to learning? And that, for me, that conversation will lead necessarily to these things. All right, talking about the 5 factors here that will lead to great teaching, and therefore having great citizens that contribute to the productivity of the nation. And that includes 5 things that I've talked about: self-examination platform, creativity and entrepreneurship support, shared learning resources, community knowledge systems, and leadership platform. And that is it. I hope you have a wonderful day and or night, and have a good week and a good year. Okay, bye.